wrote me, about a year before he did the book, and he just plagiarizes me as if that's an actual event of history himself. But what I had explained even at the time, and it went right over his head. I had these introductory paragraphs which it explained this unfortunate history of discovering that this wasn't an historical fact. And so what I did was, I took full literary license then to speak my own words through the mouth of Benjamin Franklin in even a far more glorious manner. So when it's funny, a few years ago I did I needed to look through. I've got about 3.5 million files, personal files, on the main system that computer system that I work on, and and I'm often working in 2 operating systems at the same time, and I didn't have the other operating system running, so I wanted to refer to a few sentences in Ben Franklin's paper, Nature and Necessity of a Paper Currency. So I just jumped online really quick and grabbed it off the Virginia, University of Virginia site, and when I first when I did that a few years ago, there was like 12 returns for the Google search. And when I did that just a few months ago, there were 25,400,000 references to that paper. And from the first page of the searches were all these references to Benjamin Franklin, quoting Benjamin Franklin on a mathematically perfected economy. And so what happened after Jakerin plagiarized me is I took those explanatory paragraphs out of the beginning of my parable to trap further plagiarists. If they've got a reference to that, it proves they're a plagiarist, especially if they don't cite the source, which is my work. So the quotes of Benjamin Franklin that are going around the world are actually the words of Mike Montagne. And so anyway, that's a part of this story which isn't the history. But in the United States history, there was a great controversy between Hamilton and Jefferson. A struggle. Jefferson, didn't have the answer worked out, is the only reason that I figure that he didn't prevail, because the arguments for mathematically perfected economy are elementary and incontrovertible. They're easily understood that there's one and one only solution for inflation and deflation. I mean, it's second grade math. If inflation and deflation are defined respectively as increases or decreases in circulation per represented wealth, then obviously there's only one solution for inflation and deflation. If disposition is caused by interest, there's only one solution for disposition. If inherent, irreversible, and therefore terminal multiplication of artificial indebtedness by interest is caused by interest, then the only solution for that is eradication of interest. And then you find my second categoric fault, which is systemic manipulation of the cost or value of money or property, because the only powers to manipulate the cost or value of money or property are through the volume or disposition of the currency. Therefore, we've already solved that by our first and third solutions. So in fact, there is one, that's a basic proof of mathematically perfected economy right off the top of my head. So there is one and one. No, it's ridiculous. The people contest this to their own detriment, but there is one and one only solution for mathematically perfected economy, and that is this eradication of interest and obligatory schedule of payment. And that's it. It's cut and dry as that. So the basic history can be very, very, very well simplified. There was a struggle about banking at the founding of the country. In that struggle, Jefferson evidently, I don't know where this quote came from. I don't. I haven't changed a word of it myself. And when I explained it to this man, Jacques Walker, in Valdez, Alaska, in the early spring of 1975, I was immediately invited to the stage to join him at the podium to explain it over the sound system to the audience. And it turned out that my explanation and of this thesis of inevitable failure and singular solution, and the further questions of the audience went on to the into the morning, and it was much longer than Mr. Walker's presentation, and everyone was so glad to have heard of it and all that. But it doesn't appear, at least today, that there's any record that any, even other than this one quote of Jefferson, that there's any even strong circumstantial evidence that the founders actually had resolved economy into its perfect form. And largely you can understand that, and this is what the history really is all about. I'm not really saying the history so much as I'm telling what my interpretations of it are.
Right.
Largely, the history at the time is that they were leaving. They were the first republic, a colony that revolted against a monarchy. The world was dominated by monarchies. The money was gold and silver. And that, it had been a predominating mode of thinking for a long time. In fact, Franklin's paper, Nature and Necessity of a Paper Currency, which he wrote when he was 23, is very, very good evidence that, that yes, indeed, people were thinking along the directions that they needed to think. But even in my own editorial standards are such that if I wrote Franklin's paper, its full title is A Modest Inquiry, ENQ is how they pronounced or spelled it in those days, A Modest Inquiry into the Nature and Necessity of a Paper Currency. Now, if my own editorial standards are such that I impose upon myself that if I would have asked the questions and made the assertions that Franklin does in this paper, I don't make assertions. I demonstrate that what I lay out before you is true, and I actually consider that to be an obligation of writing of this nature. But those standards would have worked out Franklin's questions, and yet this paper is rightly considered relatively revolutionary for the time, because he basically writes it in support of a bill that's been proposed to issue paper currency. And they have been issuing paper currency, and he observes that the more that they issued, the better off they were, that they realized more prosperity than they could on their limited gold and silver coin, which there was relatively little of. And so these are just observations. So he observes that they did better, but he does raise the questions of that too much circulation would be somehow bad, and that too little obviously was not good either. But what was the right amount is the question. And I resolve this by a simple problem that illustrates the principle perfectly to you. The question, how much circulation should be in existence, has been asked for not just hundreds of years, but far more. And you can't accomplish this purpose with a finite quantity of a precious metal or any other means other than mathematically perfected economy. And you can understand why from this problem that I developed. Here's a thing that a problem solver, a way of thinking that we have to pursue if we're going to solve a problem. Somebody asserts something like this. So like Franklin, he asserts that, we observed that we prospered more under more paper money. And this paper, its very title is A Modest Inquiry into the Nature and Necessity of a Paper Currency. He's saying it's necessary But he's also saying it's an inquiry into the nature. He's not unraveled what the nature has to be. And this mandate that we may discuss later is our only way to transitioning to mathematically perfected economy is an actual proof that a promissory note is the only vehicle, not just by any kind of a margin or something like that. When you take the requisites of what the circulation has to be, they prescribe a promissory note is the only vehicle for an immutable circulation, a mutable currency. So anyway, Franklin asks these questions and he asserts these observations. Well, the question is, what's the right volume of circulation? How much more might benefit you more if you're considering issuing more? How should it be issued? How should it be? Should it persist in circulation forever, or should it be retired? How does how does having too much circulation harm you? How does having too little circulation harm you? By asking each of these questions and just attempting to answer them, we're filling in a picture that's pushing us toward the one truth all the time. Obviously, if we don't have enough circulation, we can't convey our trade. There might be other things that we could realize about not enough circulation. So this problem that I can explain quickly exemplifies this. So suppose there's 1,000 of us. That's all there are. And each of us are productive. We each have $10 of circulation of any kind. Doesn't matter whether it's paper, money, whatever, And there's 1,000 of us, and we're in a circle facing the center of the circle. We all do our work, and every so often, over a period of time, we turn to the person on the left, and we pay our whatever we have, $10 each, let's say it is. We turn to our left, the person on our left, we hand them our $10 for their production that day, which we need to continue our production. So their production comes to us. Likewise, the person on our right did the exact same thing at the exact same time. So we received another $10, and we delivered our production to the person on our right. 1,000 people, an entire economy, all of its wealth can be exchanged at one time. And there's a very important thing to realize about why. Because there is a representation for all of the wealth. Now, so this can go on continuously. Every period, everyone can exchange. All wealth in the world can be exchanged at all times. Doesn't matter how long that period is. Because there's a representation for anything. Anyone who's produced and acquired the representation can acquire that much wealth for it. All wealth can be exchanged at all times, so long as the circulation equals the volume of the wealth, which is accomplished in mathematically perfected economy. Now, take that same circle, and every fifth person around it take $5 away from them, as if, for instance, they had paid against a debt subject to interest. Now, attempt to do this transaction. It goes 4 people to the left of the first person to start the trade. And it gets to the 5th person, and they don't have enough to purchase the wealth, the production of the person to their left. What do they have to do? They have to work that much in addition to their production. So they're being forced to work more, and the reason is they've been deprived rightful representation. And this alone tells us there's a principle that we can never abandon, and that is to tolerate exploitation, which means unearned taking. You see? But so that's the difference. That's the one problem which, I went home from high school and thought that up. It's because that's how you examine a problem, you see. And so what you usually do is you explore for the extremes. How much would be too much? How much would be too little? What makes each whatever they are, and they point to the resolution of the problem. So the fact is, you need a representation for all wealth. So there's your resolution of how much money needs to be in circulation, and it also tells what the nature of the currency. So in that one problem, we've resolved all the questions and mere assertions that Franklin makes in this paper, A Modest Inquiry into the nature and necessity of a paper currency. So this relates to history, because what's really